How are you, everybody? Last time we discussed the manpower contribution of Hindus to World War I and II. We mentioned that in World War II, India contributed 2.5 million soldiers for the war effort. And out of this 2.5 million, 2 million were Hindus. They fought in Africa, they fought in Europe when the Allies marched on Berlin, and they fought against Japanese. So in all three fronts, on the land, India's contributions to World War II effort were very great. There was only another country, one more country, that contributed more in terms of the war effort on the land. That was the United States of America. On the Allied side, we had only three countries, essentially. United States, United Kingdom, and India. And on the Axis side, you had Hitler's Germany, Japan, and Italy. Thus, there were three on the Allied side and three on the Axis side. But whenever we make celebrations on November 1st, on November 11th, on Remembrance Day, we rarely mention India, and this has to be corrected. So if these videos help make the decision to elevate the Indian efforts, the Hindu efforts in defeating Hitler, I would have done my job. So besides the manpower, India contributed materials, mostly geological, iron ore, coal, manganese, copper, and the factory-made steel and different kinds of steels that were used in the war effort. We all think of astronomy as a place where there are large numbers, like millions and billions. If you look at the number of tons of material that was contributed by India, it comes to millions of tons. And if you look at the yards of textile that was sent to England for the war effort, it comes to billions. So these are all the positive effects that is India contributed. Besides minerals, India also contributed textiles, timber, and most important, food. Then India also was subjected to a very tragic environmental degradation and also loss of life in famines made by humans. Mukherjee writes in her book that, and I will read it to you, the colony's entire output of timber, woolen textiles and leather goods, as well as 3/4 of its steel and cement, were diverted to the defense of the British Empire. India was, next to Britain, the largest contributor to the empire's war. Now, you think of other materials like leather. We needed material to make belts, to make shoes, and other material that required leather, and India contributed quite a bit of that. These are all the positive contributions India made. But then war also had a very negative effect on India. Their resources were depleted, their forests were cut down without any hope of reforestation, and then famines were created that killed millions of people in India. Thus, for all its sacrifices, India stays not mentioned on Remembrance Day, when people are celebrating and remembering their own efforts, their own contributions, and not giving any credit to Hindus that helped in the war effort in defeating Hitler's Germany. So, during the war, India contributed 196.7 million tons of coal. That is almost 200 million tons of coal, 6 million tons of iron ore, and 2 million tons of steel. These are all astronomical figures, millions and millions. Then, the Oxford Encyclopedia of Economic History, Volume 2, says India contributed close to 5 billion yards of textiles every year during the war for 5 years. Just imagine 5 billion yards. See, the distance between Earth and Moon or Earth and Sun are not even a billion. Now you can think of the age of the Earth, which is 4.5 billion years old, or age of the universe, which is more than 13 billion years old. So we are talking of astronomical figures. So what did India get in return? Nothing. No mention. For all these efforts, India stayed aloof, not because of it, by its own choice, but because others made this choice. Others wanted to excel, even though they didn't deserve it. Thus, the problem with ravaging of India is mainly on the forests. World War I and II saw deforestation on a very large scale. And after World War I, mind you, the colonial power did almost nothing to reforest. And by the time they decided, or they didn't really decide anything, the World War II came upon. And they cut down more forests. And there was no reforestation. Of course, they left India after World War II. Thus, India suffered a lot in terms of its resources being depleted, and no effort made by the government of the day to recuperate the losses, the resources. Then the same Encyclopedia of Economic History says, during World War II, India produced more than 50 kinds of arms and ammunition and supplied 75% of its own wartime requirements. So besides furnishing the men that were required, the men and women required for the war effort, both on the field and off the field, they also made their own weapons. Thus, while India's efforts were phenomenal, astronomical, the credit given was very little. It's about time we recognize these efforts and rewrite the narratives on Remembrance Day to include India, especially Hindus, in those efforts. I will not be exaggerating if I say that Hindus bailed out the West in their both wars, World War I and World War II. Now today, people say things disparagingly about Hindus. What is the source of these criticisms? Zero. There is no source. They only suppress the history to magnify their own efforts, which were really not that great in the first place. And Indian royal families donated large amounts of cash for the war effort. For example, Nizam of Hyderabad in 1941, he contributed funds necessary for 2 Royal Air Force squadrons. And there were other Nawabs, feudal lords, capitalists, who contributed in private capacity for the war effort. Now, the war also distorted the colony's already broken economic system. The Oxford Encyclopedia for Economic History says again, wartime shortages and supply problems held industry back and caused severe disruptions to the internal market for consumer goods, which culminated in the Bengal famine of 1943 that claimed more than 3 million lives. Some other estimates put the real death toll over 7 million. So how did this famine happen? And how so many millions died? See, whenever we talk of India's effort in World War I or World War II, we are always talking of millions. Millions of tons of iron ore, millions of tons of coal, millions of tons of steel, and then billions of yards of textile, and then millions of tons of leather and other material. And not to speak of millions of lives that were lost because of the stupidity of one person. And that person was Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill was advised by Lord Sherwell. Both of whom were suffering from an acute sense of Hindu phobia, and also they didn't like India. They wanted all the benefits of occupying India, but when they came to the issue of doing something good for India or Hindus, they never did it. They never wanted to do it. They said that Indians or any Hindus were of low quality culture and civilization, and therefore they were only to be exploited and not to be helped. And when the Secretary of State, Leopold Emery, was talking to Churchill, he felt that Churchill had a pathological hatred of India and Hindus. So when he was informed, that is, Churchill was informed of all those people who died in the famine, Churchill reportedly asked, was Gandhi alive or dead? So that was his attitude. Whenever the issue of India came, he went bonkers. He couldn't control his tongue or his emotions. He actually comes out as a deeply troubled racist, and also he was genocidal. So why did they really create this famine to kill so many millions of people? It is pure hatred. And these facts are not recorded by the colonial power because they wanted to fight wars. Their efforts to show how great they were, but really not showing the negative side of the colonial power. Today we talk of reconciliations, fact-finding. There are all over the world, there are movements that are recognizing this. When atrocities were committed in Congo that resulted in such great number of people getting killed and their leader, Patrice Lumumba, arrested. After many years, Belgium passed a resolution in their parliament asking for an apology of the Belgian Congo, people of Belgian Congo, for the atrocities committed by Belgians in that period. Later, Canadian Prime Minister issued apologies for the way the indigenous people were treated by the Christians, both Catholics and Protestants in Canada. The genocide, the looting of the land, and not providing facilities for the indigenous people, and breaking every agreement they signed even before the ink on the paper dried up. Thus, Belgium and Canada have issued statements of apologies, and in South Africa we had a Commission of Truth and Reconciliation. But somehow the wrongs committed against Hindus in India go unnoticed, go unreported, let alone being a subject for truth and reconciliation. Don't you think it's about time that Hindus should get an apology for the way they were treated? For all the positive contributions they made to our efforts, they were not given this chance of apology or find the truth and then ready to reconcile. Instead of that, Britain continued to meddle in the affairs of India because Nehru, the Prime Minister, the first Prime Minister of India, was, in his own words, a Britisher rather than an Indian. Thus, we witness a tragic history of a great group of people, Hindus, who have not been given a chance to find the truth and then for reconcile. But without reconciliation, Britain continues to get benefits from India, both economic and strategic. So, don't you think it is about time British people sit down and have a thorough examination of their behavior in India, especially during the World War II, and its aftermath. Thank you for listening to it, and we will come back again with the third part of the series soon.